brief intro. This is Fam Electric Ghost, and where we interview independent artists from around the world on our podcast. And tonight we have the experimental rock hip hop band Space Adaptation Syndrome from Orlando, Florida. And we're glad to have you guys on the program.
Thank you so much. Awesome. We're glad to be on the program.
Yeah, so we sent you the question.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having us.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, it's great. We've been doubling down on our interviews during this kind of coronavirus crisis, and it's been giving bands like a good opportunity to still connect with their fans if they can't do shows and stuff, you know.
Thank you.
So we sent you the questions, and since we have a full band here, I don't know who wants to answer the first question that we always ask any artist we talk to. When did you first get into music, and at what age? Which band member wants to take that on first?
I could go first if anyone else doesn't mind. But yeah, I got into music as early as I can remember. I like to say that I get it from my mother, and like I was already dancing in the womb. My first chord was an umbilical cord, but no, it goes from there. Just I think just having the love from my family, just supporting the music. I think I had it all my childhood, and just growing up with it, but to seriously get into music and writing and getting into other folks is like when I was a kid, at least 10 or 11 years old, and like that's when like Rock Band came out, and when Rock Band came out, that's when it gave me like a solid like confidence.
That's pretty cool. So maybe whoever else is on the line, maybe turn yours down a little bit too. I'm still hearing some feedback. Okay, that sounds a little better. Thank you. So who else wants to take that question on?
I guess I'll go next. So I started like playing guitar when I was 11. I was like a big like fan of the Beatles. Like my dad had like the Beatles anthology documentary, and I remember like just like always watching that. And there was always a guitar around, but like one day I just like was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do this now. And so it was like the most anticlimactic, like life-changing decision of my life. So it was good. And I was 11. So
that's interesting because the Beatles, even today, I've talked to maybe like 50 artists in the last 2 years, and the Beatles comes up like 50% of the time. So their influence on songwriters from multiple genres, is still strong, which is interesting. So who wants to take on that? The last one.
Well, for me, I come from like a bit of a different background than these guys. I'm mostly like a hip hop guy. So I started writing poetry when I was like very young. And I'd say the first artist that really made me want to start rapping was Jay-Z. Once I heard him, I was like, whoa, this is like poetry in like a whole cooler type way. And it really like pushed me to start writing my own stuff like in a musical way. But I always had a love for like putting words together.
So what kind of poets did you look up to besides like hip hop poetry? Were you into like Harlem Renaissance poets or beat poets or that
the thing was, I was so young. It was more like I learned about. It was probably in like second or third grade. We were just learning about poetry, just how they do in elementary school. And I just really liked putting words together just from that aspect. I didn't really have many influences. I was just like, wow, I really enjoy putting words together. And then when I started listening to more hip hop, I was like, oh, this basically is poetry.
Yeah.
So I guess like the rappers were my first real introduction to poetry, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the old school hip hop. If I go back, to like the Public Enemies of the world and the Boogie Down Productions and stuff like that. I think the poetry was like really the primary focus back then, and just the rhyme.
Yes,
structure.
Exactly.
Yeah, listen to something like The Message, and you're like, wow, that's pretty significant. And the interesting thing is it kind of pulls the kind of storytelling that you get from guys like Dylan. Or in the rock world, Bob Dylan, they were very much into very literate type of songwriting, and rap and hip hop has a lot of those elements because it's usually telling a story that's pretty deep and it has a lot of character to it and a lot of passion to it, and it's not just like a typical song structure. So it's interesting that you guys are taking the sounds that you have, which are somewhat progressive rock with hip hop, and that's very experimental, and that's kind of totally in my zone of what I like to do myself. But yeah. So the next question I always ask everybody: so how long have you been working on music? And I guess in this case, like, when did you guys start realizing you wanted to write your own music?
Oh my gosh, that's such a. I honestly would like to think of it when I started joining other human souls and just getting together. Is there an echo at all?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo. I don't know if it's doubling. Maybe somebody else has got their phone on. So it's like maybe in the same room, kind of take one of the phones away from make sure there's not two phones next to each other.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I still hear you.
I think I know.
So to continue off with your question, like I said, when Rock Band came out, it was like a physical and a spiritual experience, because you get the two, with the divine mind, with the physical body and the dream, that come to one, really. And so Rock Band was like a physical thing, like, oh, I have something that's interesting. So then I went to like this band camp when I was really young, and I started like just jamming with other people, and that was like when I was like 13, 14, and then we just started jamming and actually started making solid parts.
That's interesting. So you're talking about the actual video game Rock Band, right?
Yeah, it's so great because I looked it up. I forgot what year. I think it came out in 2007, maybe.
Yeah. I used to jam on that with my daughter.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so my dad did the lead guitar, and yeah, I did the drums. And
yeah, my daughter did the drums, and I did the guitar.
Yeah, there we go. And where'd you play the?
It was a good way to. Yeah, it was a good way to get kids to think, music was fun.
Exactly. And it's sort of sad that like that could be the future of music in a way. That's what I sort of try to do.
Yeah.
But
that's
so who wants to go? Yeah, who wants to? You want to keep on going? If somebody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, so for me, it was like kind of weird because I mean, for a while as a guitar, like a younger guitar player, all I did was just like learn covers. Like it started out like I guess like metal stuff. Like I was big into metal, and then from there I kind of got into like progressive rock, and I had this really negative experience with this jazz band director when I was in middle school, and that kind of like made me really hate improvisation. So for a while I was like, not that I didn't like want to write music, but I wasn't like, I feel like improvisation is a big part of the creative process, and I felt like I was like neglecting it. But then like I started getting into bands like I don't know, like the Allman Brothers and stuff like that, and I started listening to jazz music too. Like I think like in 10th grade I started listening to like Miles Davis, like specifically albums like In a Silent Way, and I don't know if I can say it on here. It's keyword brew.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I'm a big fan of Sun Ra, and I used to go see the Allmans when they were playing. I'm in my 50s, but I've seen a bunch of Allman Brothers concerts, and then just watching, Greg Allman on a Hammond B3 organ, and then I had a big love of bands like Funkadelic, which were a progressive funk band, a psychedelic funk band, and the idea of like mixing rock, like what Davis did on Bitches Brews, having that fusion rock kind of jazz thing was always something that the Allmans kind of integrated. And you get bands like Steely Dan that do like an integration between jazz and rock. And that's always been a big, being a keyboardist, we tend to kind of go there because it's just like if you're going to dive deep into keyboards, you're going to tend to go classical, jazz, or progressive to try to get your chops. And then you can get into rock once you have like your skill set. But yeah, it's just interesting where people come from. And you guys are doing some very experimental stuff, which is pretty cool. And, you name checked in your background, that King Crimson, and I mean that I know who they are, and I'm a big fan of them. But you're probably like the first interview in like 40 interviews that mentioned that band.
Wow.
No, for me,
so that's kind of sad because I love bands like that, but that's kind of cool that you guys actually are in that mindset.
Oh yeah. Well, for me, Fripp is that's my favorite guitar player of all time. Like, I think he's in a way like it's gonna sound pompous, but he's very much like he's a postmodern guitarist in a way. You know, in the '70s, you had all these guys that were with long hair and were trying to like just like playing like I don't know, like more like it was like funk stuff or like a lot of stuff, and he was just like screw that, I'm gonna do this like weird like Bella Bartok like fusion, modern classical fusion, and it was a unique thing, and he was also influenced a lot by like Miles Davis and a lot of jazz fusion guys like that. They were kind of like all doing the same. They're all like starting to get like more into like mysticism, as well as weird like modern harmony ideas. And I guess going back to Bitches Brew, like that's like especially like the chord voicing choices that Chick Corea and Joe Zawanu like made like have been like a huge like influence on me like as a harmonic player, as a guitar player.
That's interesting because I'm a big fan of guys like Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois and like producers that are more willing to go in that kind of jazz fusion direction or experimental direction, like what Eno did with Bowie, like in his Berlin phase, the very interesting stuff that was going on there. And I'm a big fan of like bands like Yes and Peter Gabriel Genesis, where you had like this like rock opera and very interesting time changes and it's just the willingness to go anywhere the music was going to bring you is more what I was rather than trying to do like a traditional 3-minute rock and roll hit was always like the way I always tend to want to write. So it's interesting when I find people who are in that mindset. So the next question I usually ask bands is like who are your influences and reference points? I kind of mentioned some of them, but maybe you could talk more about that. Who wants to go? Oh, did I lose you guys?
I'll go. For me, Jay-Z is probably my favorite artist. He inspired me to like take lyrics like very very seriously, and artists like Nas, Tupac, Mobb Deep, like the 90s stuff. Yeah. But as I got older, I like a big artist that had a really big influence on me wanting to go more experimental was Danny Brown, because he was like incorporating like industrial sounds with like rock, but still hip hop, and just his voice. Like it was just like completely different than a lot of the stuff I was hearing. And that made me kind of be like, there's really no boundaries to this. Like, and it kind of made me want to kind of incorporate many different sounds. Like that's kind of what made me want to start working with these guys, because they were doing something so different than I was doing. So Danny Brown definitely is one of the biggest influences on me.
Yeah, I see that. You guys also mentioned like Mars Volta, which I hear in your sound too.
Are you able to hear us?
I can hear you guys.
Okay. Yeah, no, Mars Volta has been a big influence on me, especially just like the way that like Omar Rodriguez Lopez like writes. He writes in this very kind of like kaleidoscopic way where it's almost like I mean, you look at guys like William S. Burroughs, he does like a lot of cut up technique and uses like a lot of dub techniques where he'll have the musicians like record to like just the bass part, but they won't like know what each other, they don't know like what they're all playing. So like then when you put it all together, it's like kind of like this whole thing that none of them could have predicted would happen.
That's interesting. I was watching a documentary of Peter Gabriel, and he was talking about how sometimes in the studio, they actually one time they put down a bunch of drum takes, like 99 drum takes. And then they went and took the actual analog tape and cut it and spliced it kind of haphazardly around just to see what would happen. And they actually, went through taking it straight, and then they liked this kind of cut up of actually physically splicing the tape and taking different drum, parts from different days and, the week or different times, and finding that gave them what they were looking for. And that's kind of like the experimentation that George Martin, did with the Beatles, with, a lot of the work they see on Sgt. Pepper and later into Abbey Road, that kind of experimentation that, later you see like Hendrix do it, you see Tangerine Dream, you see like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they all start going in these kind of directions.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you can only do so much with instruments, and you can still keep moving on and growing with instruments. We see like how the electric world is sort of, always been infused with music, but now it's, a big part of it, MIDI, of course, but then also having like octapads on drums and electronic drums. And it's just cool how we can incorporate multiple genres into one song with like multiple, sounds and what the future holds.
Yeah, I think genre mixing seems to be the big thing today. I've talked to a lot of artists that are mixing like jazz with hip hop, or mixing, psychedelic or progressive rock with hip hop, or, other forms of electronic music, like EDM artists actually working with like a punk rock band or a grunge band. And it seems like this kind of cross pollination is really cool, because like, they got people out there. I'm a synthesis, right? So you got people who say, oh, and I have modes, but I have digital synths too. And I'll see guys saying, well, I only am going to play analog synths. Like, and I love my analog synths, but sometimes I want to play a digital synth because it can do something different.
Oh, yeah.
You take what your tools are, right? As a keyboardist, you got a Hammond B3, you got a Yamaha piano, and then you got your Moog, and then maybe you have a Phantom or something, or a chord. You take what each one of those can do to service the song, and maybe some songs have more or less of either one. You just take whatever's going to do it. You take samples, you take loops, you take clips, you do a DAW, you don't use a DAW, you use tape. It's kind of like whatever services the song is how you should look at it, rather than saying I'm only going to be an analog artist, or I'm only going to be a digital artist, or I'm only going to be this. And I think it seems to be more people are deciding to kind of break the barriers and cross between.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like for me, like I try to have like as much of like a hybridized like workflow as much as possible. I feel like there's a lot of people that like want to fetishize like analog equipment, like tube amplifiers, and like using tape and stuff like that. And I just think that that's like very archaic, and I think people are closing themselves to like a lot of possibilities. Like me personally, I mainly use Logic. That's like my main DAW that I produce with, and I feel like honestly, I can do a lot more with that than I could with my tape machines that I have, So.
Yeah, I mean, I like using like in my workflow, I use like hardware, like Zoom, like L20s and R24s, and I capture all my stuff in a kind of old-fashioned way of like just putting them down into these like digital tape machines. But then I kind of forces me to have some limitations in terms of what I can do, but it can capture some of my analog stuff and my digital stuff in a kind of in a way that's kind of like a free jazz or jam band style of recording. And that's just the way I choose to record, because I would like to get my analog sense to do analog loops through LFO modulation and things like that. And you can get a lot of cool things to happen in that kind of modular Eurorack world. But then the stuff, I have a Teenage Engineering OPZ and OP1, and I'll do stuff with that, or use like an Akai MPC if I need to use that. But it's kind of like I like hardware, and I understand that there's a lot of stuff you can do with the DAWs, but I've kind of put myself in this kind of zone where I like having the freedom to kind of just do whatever I want with hardware recording. But I understand that the DAW opens up a lot, and I'm opposed to using it, but there's a lot of cool things you can do.
Yeah, exactly. Because the hardware, you can physically touch more things and have more of a mechanical mind, having it right in front of you, feeling it and moving with it. Because, sometimes in the digital world, we could get sort of sidetracked and lost without seeing it right in front of us. Because I come from like a mechanical background, and like, I tend to look at things that like the structure and the form of it, and then also just the flow and the feel. But then also just having this equipment, it takes a lot of space, expensive. Like I wish I had all this stuff, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing is that with a laptop and Logic, you can put together a theoretical or virtual version of what I do with my Moogs or my Eurorax. But there's one thing that, like you said, if you have those surface controls and you roll the tape, you can get stuff in the moment that is like a painting. I kind of look at, like George Martin once said, that I could have recorded the Beatles the way they were playing in Berlin. But I chose to look at them like Monet looks at a painting, right? An expressionist painting. And I used the studio to interpret the sound. And I'm not going to give you what a live performance is. I'm going to give you an album, which is more of a sound painting. And I like the idea of doing sound paintings. And however you get to that, whether it's a DAW or using surface controls or, knob per function on an analog synth, or getting really detailed in a DAW and getting to that same point. I just like anybody that has the kind of artistic drive to make the sound a little bit more than what you could do live.
Exactly.
No, I agree. And I kind of like want to add something to that, which is Joe Walsh. I mean, I guess like the thing with DAWs, and I kind of agree with like Dimitri, is that it's very easy to get sidetracked. And I feel like that's something I've run across with a lot of musicians that produce, that mainly do focus on just using a DAW, is that they become perfectionists, and that gets in the way of them wanting to, that just gets in the way of their productivity. And I feel like for me, like I always like try to just when I write music, like I literally just jot it down at the top of my head. Even if I don't like it, then I'll give it like a day. And I try to like have that an analog mindset of like, okay, this is not going to be perfect, but I'm just going to let this ride out,
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I would say that the DAW has kind of ruined in music in some ways, is that spontaneity and the happy accidents that you would get if you went to a recording studio and you're sitting next to a producer, like a guy like a Brian Eno. He's going to go and just go off the wall and change the key. He's going to go up on the board and say, why don't you just throw these notes together or these parts together, just because that's what I think would sound right, and not that some computer is going to tell you it's the wrong BPM or it's the wrong key, or you're trying to make it sound perfect. That sometimes if the happy accidents or the things that are slightly off in music history, there's many examples of famous albums where the accident actually made the song. And if you try to make it perfect, it would actually not sound as good as if you actually, if that perfection shouldn't be necessarily the goal. Like the goal should be to serve the song. if you know what I mean. Oh, I think we lost one of you guys. I think we still have Amari.
Okay, yeah, I'm still here.
I
don't know what happened.
The other guys dropped off. I'll have to try to bring them back in. I think they can try to come back in, but then their connection must have dropped. But so let's continue the interview with you, and we'll talk to you about the next questions that we had. See if we can get them to come back in.
I think.
Oh, I hear you guys.
Are you back, Connor?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You guys back?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you dropped it a little bit, but I was gonna get on to the next question. What would you consider your writing style or your genre? Like when you guys come together as a band, does one guy write the majority of the song? Is like a key songwriter in your band? Or do you all kind of bring all the elements of the song together? Or do you work off to the side and then come together? Do you always create together, or is it a combination of many different ways of doing it?
I like our relationship because we all have such respect for what each other do. So it's I kind of just let them do the music aspect, and then they bring me the music, and then I just write the lyrics to it. So I kind of like it that way because not that you can step on toes in a way, but when you are all kind of doing different things, it kind of makes it an easier mesh versus if we were all kind of trying to put everything together put everything together all at once. So they kind of just do the music, and once they have what they like, they give it to me, and then I just do my thing lyrically over it.
So when you get a piece of music from the other guys, do you try to make do you have a lot of like books full of like lyrics and things you're working on, and then you try to see what's going to fit, or do you kind of just listen to what it is and maybe come up with it, or is a combination of, yeah, maybe I have all this reference material, maybe this works from this project or this page, or what's your process?
Oh, that's a good question. It's honestly a mixture of both. I sometimes will like jot down some lyrics that I like, just like, just writing them down. And if it works, I'll like add it to some tracks. But I normally like to like let the music influence my lyrics, because I feel like it comes off more organic and authentic when I can just like hear the music and then let the words come from that. That's my favorite way to do it, honestly.
Yeah, I find that sometimes what I call it stream of consciousness type of the initial take, like if you're a songwriter and you get in, you hear the music and you start to put your vocals down, you say, you know what, I'm just going to free flow it, let the tape run, and then go back and then look at it and say, okay, well, I can take this or I can leave that. And you kind of
exactly
you hear what you hear, and you feel what you feel.
Definitely. Freestyling is very important to my craft. I feel like freestyling writing, because when you're freestyling, you sometimes get a flow that you never could get if you just wrote it down and then tried to do it, because like you said, it's just like you're feeling off the music. It's like you're combining into one. So sometimes I'll just hear something and I'll just freestyle on it, and I'll listen back and be like, yo, I really like that part, and I'll keep that, and then I'll freestyle again and be like, oh, I like that part, and then put it together.
That's interesting. It's another little history. I was watching a documentary on Frank Zappa. And Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, and his famous album, like Apostrophe. And he was talking about how he had this massive catalog of all the live recordings of the Mothers of Invention. Every time they went somewhere, they taped it. And then he would go back to his house and then listen to the tapes and then grab bits from the freestyle live concerts and then say, hey, yeah, that worked. I can turn that into something. And he found it like, that live kind of method of just capturing all this live raw performance tended to give him very authentic and really honest compositions that when sometimes he could sit down and write something very intricate, but he always liked the stuff that he grabbed from the concerts and then molded together. Which was interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I agree 100%. And like we also have a connection. We play live together as well, and we have this other project called the Other Jam Podcast, and that's where we like all just come to improvisation and come to like learn like how you were saying, just we create these like tunes and music that just comes up out of nowhere from space, and like we just have a sequence.
Yeah, I think that's really, I was a big fan of Van Morrison's bands back in the late 60s and 70s. And he was very much into this kind of expressionist, kind of jam, free jazz thinking of doing, like you listen to Moon Dance, you listen to Astro Weeks. There's this kind of free flowing thing. He could just kind of start throwing in all this Celtic mysticism. And he would just start talking about King Arthur. He'd start talking about Thoreau. He'd start talking about all these like Victorian poets and all these weird, Celtic stories or stories from, Scotland and Ireland and, all kinds of Arthurian mysticism. He'd just throw it in until he was reading, his own personal reading. He just had that in his head. And then he would hear something and say, well, that'll work. I was always like, I think that's kind of free flow. It's hard to see today with so many people. Like when we get back to like, if you're in the DAW and you're not using it in the way that we're talking about, you kind of get locked into the beat or the clip. We're trying to find that perfect, groove. And then you're not doing the kind of experimental work that you guys are doing, which is kind of my love. I love a good beat that somebody puts together on an 808 or a 909 or a 727 or a Linn drum machine or whatever they're using. And I like, clip-based production that people do today. But I would always say I'm probably always going to be more of a Sun Ra, Lennon, McCartney, Davis style of recording is always going to really touch my heartstrings a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel like we're really losing that organic nature a lot nowadays, and I definitely feel like a lot of music is like very over processed. I mean, there's definitely like artists that are still like guys like Flying Lotus, like even though it's like very produced in a DAW, he gets guys like Thundercat in there, and he even had Herbie Hancock on there, and he's trying to integrate, very high tech with, I guess the organic, like you said, stream of consciousness nature of jazz. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you take the DAW's capability to be your like 24 track recorder.
Yes.
And then you still bring in some of those great improvisational characteristics that you can get out of free jazz and progressive rock and funk. And if you can bring funk, progressive rock, and jazz and then bring hip hop into it, then yeah, you can take advantage of the DAW and not get down the rabbit hole or trying to get it super clean. Because I think funk was always like Bootsy is like you got to get it to be like that dirty funk, like George Clinton. You got to get it to be kind of like that. That's the whole point.
Exactly. You want to hear those scratches and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So when you guys are recording in the DAW, you guys are using like Logic. Is that what you said you're using?
Yeah, so normally like I'll literally just like record. I'll kind of like have I'll come up with like a structure like for the song with just like guitar parts and bass parts, and I'll have like a temp like basic drum track, and then I do that all in Logic, but I don't really use synths. Right? I mean, I have like a couple synths in the track, but it's literally just guitar, bass, and then I'll bounce those out, send it to Dimitri. He works in Ableton, and then once we have the drums in it, and his drum tracks always like make the track like 20-30 times better, and then Dimitri Amiri comes in, and then we'll just like finish like tracking the vocals like over at my place in Logic.
That's an interesting workflow, using those two tools together.
Yeah.
So you guys like very focused, like some bands I was watching another documentary on like Metallica, and they in their early career they were highly focused on getting the perfect drum track, and they would be like in isolation trying to get that drum track and not actually play as a band when they recorded the song. And I guess their Black album, they radically changed that to go back to like playing as a full unit to get the feel of the songs a little bit more to like what it would sound like. So have you guys like played with like recording as a full band, or are you kind of into the recording technique of trying to get like the drums and the bass and the percussion tracks down in separation from the recording it as a full unit?
Right. I think like right now, I think it's like we would do that, and like we do kind of do that with our like Dimitri was saying, like with our like kind of like what we call the Other Jam podcast, where we just kind of like improvise. But I think sorry.
I see what you're saying, because I love that live recording and all together, and I feel that huge difference when I'm playing live with any members and like talented musicians in the same room and just sharing that energy. It's we all feel it when we go see a live show. You just feel the liveness and the energy. So, and if you're really in tune with yourself, you can really just bounce up and, like you said, create like a more of a song feel, and it creates more of a whole round. And so now I think it sort of helps us with all our schedules. And like I'm blessed to have like a studio at my house to record drums, and like a nice room to record drums in. And like you said, I put it in through Live, and then because I do just run through the song over and over just until I feel that liveness, and then create these parts.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a recording kind of engineer school, the idea like musical theory of production. that if you separate the tracks and you get the vocalist in the booth, you get the drummer in a drum room mic'd up right, you don't have the bleed from the guitars or the bass coming in. So, but you run into different producers that will argue, different points. And there's no one right answer. It's like, again, it's kind of like different projects or different songs require different recording techniques.
Yeah, exactly.
And some projects might require you to kind of have a full band. Other projects are so focused on a rhythm that you really got to get it exactly right. And you have to have that kind of separation to get it perfect. And so I get that, I've been playing since I was 17. And I did the old, in the basement, in the garage with a Tascam or a Fostex and, cheap mics and getting all the bleed coming over. I understand why you would want to separate out.
Yeah.
And get it tight.
And I also blame my ADD because it helped me focus more too, to be honest, just to stay in like a cave and just to get it down in my brain. And I love what Connor taught me when I joined the group, and he was just like, just do it, just get into it. Don't even think about it. Just put yourself into it. And in a way, that's what we do if we played live together.
But it's cool that you guys are doing kind of both. That you have like you're kind of like the way Parliament and Funkadelic, they had two different bands, and the same guys were in both bands, and one of them was psychedelic and one of them was more funk. So one more rock based and one more funk based, and the guys would do different ways of recording. If they were going to put down the funk tracks, they would do a little bit more like Motown recording. If they're doing the more like rock psychedelic tracks, they're doing more like what Hendrix would do. But it's kind of interesting when you have so much material or so many different ideas that you can break out into two different projects. I've always been very interested in bands that do that.
Oh yeah, that's so fun. It's so fun because, like you said, it's sort of like a new toy when you have new instruments and like these new synthesizers and all this like machinery and instruments and like create something like that hasn't been there before because of the tools you have. And it's so cool when you have these different bands. It's like a totally new baby, a totally new project, and you can create.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you go back in the day, like with Funkadelic. I mean, Funkadelic is kind of like the basis of all modern hip hop. They were heavily sampled what Bootsy put down, what Bernie Worrell was putting down on the Moogs, and the B3s. It's like that's been like the whole I don't know, the magic sauce, the whole magic piece of everything that people have been using from funk to hip hop to all modern electronica. Probably owes a lot to what Bootsy and Bernie and George would do.
Oh yeah.
So it's interesting that those tools in the hands of like Bernie Worrell, a Moog is more of a bass tool, but in the hands of like Emerson, Keith Emerson is more of like a lead. And so you see the different uses of the same synthesizer widely vary between a funk band and a progressive rock band.
Oh yeah, and yeah, Bernie Worrell. God, yeah, I love Bernie Worrell. He's actually a huge influence of mine, like personally. Even though I'm a guitar player, but I try to use effects pedals the same way he experimental with, like you said, like the Moog, on tracks Aqua Boogie and stuff like that, where he was like you said, he was trying to create a bass sound, and I don't know. I just feel like he was his role in both those projects was extremely underrated. And actually, me and Amiri have a band called Pro Fool as well, and the song's called "Return of the Wizard of Woo," which is like a little reference to Bernie Worrell.
Yeah. Well, Bernie, yeah. I mean, a lot of people always name check Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman, and they forget to mention how significant the Moog his use of the Moogs is just as vital as anything Emerson did. Because if you look at what he was able to do to extend the instrument, he did massive, amazing leads and amazing. He basically, he went to Berkeley and he would have been trained in classical composition. So a lot of the structure of Harlem and Funkadelic songs that have this kind of progressive rock structure mixed with funk are because of his capabilities to know how to voice the chords and what to do to kind of make the songs more interesting. It's totally sometimes an unsung hero of that type of music. So it's cool that you're into it.
Oh yeah, and well, he was kind of like this can sound weird, but he's kind of like a shaman in a lot of ways, and he is like such a futurist. Like I hear like a lot of like Cecil Taylor in his playing because he comes up with these very like intricate and like rhythmic like synth parts that are just like they just like come out of nowhere that that you're like, wow, like how did he come up with that, you know what I mean? And
yeah, I mean, he's the guy that got me into wanting to have modes.
Yeah.
That's probably why I have the modes I have, because I can't find that. Man, I love Roland Jupiters and Jupiter 6s and Jupiter 8s and 106s, and Rolands have a good history in this type of music as well. But there's something about the Moog that when you really get to the bass tones they can pull and the leads they can do and just this, this overall synth power of a Moog, when you've got maybe a 3 oscillator Moog, what it can do to this day is hard to replicate. Even the Prophet 5s, they don't sound the same. It's a different tone. You use it for different things. Like a Prophet 5, I use it for more pads, because that's really what it's for. But it can do leads, but I tend to do my leads on Moogs, just because I'm a Moog guy that way.
No, I love Moogs too. They're just like such beautiful instruments. Like you said, like when you have like 3 oscillators going, like it creates like such this rich like texture, but it still sounds like so organic. Like it's not like other synthesizers where it sounds I don't want to say like fake, but it's got like this uncanny valley type of effect. It really sounds like an actual instrument.
Yeah, it doesn't. It sounds like its own acoustic instrument.
Yep.
That it's not. Unlike some synths that can replicate. Like I can get my Roland to replicate pianos. I can get it to replicate strings. But if I do a string on my Moog, it doesn't sound like any real string that you ever heard. It's actually something different. And that's kind of like the point in the sound design on synthesizers. When you get into sound design, the point is sometimes to not try to sound like real life, or to sound like something else.
Yeah,
it's kind of like what you're trying to do, But yeah, it's interesting. The rabbit holes you can get into with that. I could go on forever on that. But before the coronavirus hit, you guys said you were playing live. Like, where were you playing? And like, how are you coping with not being able to do live shows? And what are your like strategies for handling like the current state of the music industry?
So like me and Amiri were playing with our project Profa Fool, and we're playing like a decent amount of shows, like not too many. It was like it was just really hard to get like a hold of like a lot of booking like agents like in Orlando, but now that we did get like definitely like a decent amount of attention when we were playing live, but now with COVID, I think the main focus became on Instagram, and us like just trying to build like a following through like social media, because now that like it's harder to like play shows with the pandemic, it's like, well, we might as well like work with what we have to still like try to get our music out there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like interesting in Florida. I would think it's like a real heavy DJ EDM kind of trance electronica type of, or maybe traditional hip hop. Is that what's going on in the club scene there? And it's harder for like a progressive band like yourself to maybe, not that you can't find places to play, but maybe the trend is not what you're doing.
Yeah, I just think that like the nature of Orlando, it's definitely the focus is a lot more on like dance music, which is cool, and I love that, but yeah, I mean, and we've been like thinking about possibly like playing in other cities and stuff like that, because I definitely feel like that maybe like our music would fit in a little bit better in other places. And
I think like in Los Angeles and New York City, there's crowds there into like very progressive experimental stuff going back to like, the Talking Heads days, bad CBGBs and stuff like that. Being able to play clubs like in New York City that are very into, progressive music, or they're into something different. And so there's so many different clubs in New York City that are into that. That you guys would probably do very well there. Also, like overseas, if you went to London or Berlin or Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, those areas, even Tokyo. I was in Tokyo for a while. Tokyo is into everything.
Oh, I know.
Overseas. That up. We were talking about trying to get our stuff overseas. Like we were thinking, like our sound would definitely flourish overseas. So that's funny you brought that up.
Yeah, in Tokyo, you could go to Shibuya. You'd be playing every night.
Really?
I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah, we've been. It's funny you bring up Berlin because that's like the one place specifically that we've kind of like thought about, because we're starting to talk with some like musicians over there, and I don't know, just like the way that the scene like it seems over there, it just seems like you said, like it's focused like on more. It's a, I don't want to say more intellectual audience, but it's a little bit more focused on subversion than
they kind of are against like what is the popular trend in music. They've always been very experimental, going back to Kraftwerk and what Brian Eno was doing. It's like Berlin is always, I've talked to a bunch of bands in Berlin, and that scene is all about experimentation. They're very much into whatever is cutting edge. They're very much into people doing live, kind of old school, modern, modular synth guys, or, psytrance, or people doing, electronica, people experimenting with these big Euro racks. You got, these synth heads going in these massive Euro racks and playing 20-minute epics that are just like crazy. Like maybe an American audience wouldn't have the patience for that, but in Berlin, you can get people that want to see that, want to hear that. And so that's kind of, it's very encouraging if you're a band that's kind of doing something a little off kilter, or you're trying to do something more interesting. Those audiences are more into it. And so it's always been I actually got a booking agent that can get me overseas, and then we got banned from going overseas.
Really? Wow.
Well, yeah, U.S. we can't get into Europe right now. We're kind of banned because of our COVID rate. The European Union has banned like most travel from Americans going over there, and I got a booking agent just as that happened. I was like, "Oh, great!"
Wow, what a time!
Yeah,
and
but one day I'll get over it.
Yeah, exactly. Like what Connor was saying, we're just trying to build a big following on like all the platforms that are streaming, like on Spotify, mainly like Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, obviously. And I feel like we all notice that we get a following, and a lot of people from overseas as well.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, it seems like Instagram is like the new musician's home for people who are doing, the kind of work. When I was a kid, right, I'd listen to college radio, right? I'd listen to like independent radio, and the alt scene back then was like REM and SST with like Black Flag and Who's to Do, and all these bands that were kind of on off kilter, the stuff that you would see at CBGBs. And it seems like that's where that stuff is going on. So in the US, like if you go on Instagram, you go on SoundCloud, you get on YouTube, you get on all the new media, you can get to where that where you would hear like an REM back in the day. You would hear them on a college radio station. And it seems like Instagram's kind of like that college radio.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful now that it's kind of a mixed blessing. It's a mixed bag in the sense that now that everybody's got access to the internet, it means that anybody can put their music out there. It doesn't matter, how strange it might be. It doesn't matter how conventional it might be. It's all there. But at the same time, then there's also this dilemma of like it can become difficult. Like people have to figure out marketing strategies, which is still, a beneficial challenge,
Yeah, that's why, the interesting story, I got into this podcasting to kind of, broaden how I could reach my audience. And it's actually worked. But it's like, it's not something, it's like, well, I'm a musician. I'd rather be putting down tracks. But I found it's like, well, this is actually a valuable thing because I'm a music fan. Before I was a musician, I was a music fan. And it's like, so musicians finding alternative ways of connecting by doing podcasts or doing sync licensing or doing features or, working with collectives. It seems like that's like the big new thing. Like if you can get in with a bunch of bands that are in a collective, jump on a collective tour, sell collective merch, get into like kind of this kind of Grateful Dead mentality in a modern world, then you can kind of own it. Like what Tyler did with Camp Flogna,
Yeah.
This kind of thing, create this whole new scene. He created his own venue because hip hop was having a hard time getting concerts, and he said, well, I'll create my own concert. And then he can do his own thing.
Yeah, now like pretty much all the dope underground like experimental hip hop artists want to be on his festival list. Like that's definitely a good point. He really did a good job of creating his own brand with his own unique thing that he wanted to do.
Yeah,
like he saw the vision for.
Like the Odd Future Stories, they tried to go through the traditional touring mechanism, and like a lot of hip hop bands, they would get banned, right? They like cities didn't want them there because they said, oh, they're this or that, so they could. So then the whole idea of being able to do that Camp Flogna kind of guaranteed this more secure way of earning that, and presenting those bands in a very unique way. It's kind of like, Lollapalooza happened before that. We had that band that was created. But it was interesting that a hip hop, community created that, and then it's very progressive. It has a lot of different bands play that, and they're not all hip hop. So it's kind of cool to see where you can go. I think the nature of the business today is you got to like be willing to kind of cross lines.
No, I agree 100%. I think it's kind of like, to add what you're saying, it's all about like creating like a platform, like you mentioned, like Grateful Dead, and basically I don't want to say coming up with like a circus. I mean, that's kind of like what P-Funk did too, but you're creating this atmosphere where everybody is kind of mutually creating a community,
Yeah, it's the whole old hippie idea, back in San Francisco, the Haight-Ashbury kind of concept that you would just go play for 6 hours straight.
Yeah.
And you just have all these hippies hanging around, and it just kind of are all on their VW buses just following you from one gig to the next. And it's like that kind of thing kind of works. If you can get people, Pearl Jam has they might not be the biggest band anymore, but the Pearl Jam heads will follow them like the Dead.
Oh yeah.
So if you can get yourself into like this kind of scene where you get like your fans to be so into you that they'll buy all your live concerts, they'll buy your merch. And that's the weird thing today. Like you can make more money selling T-shirts than you can selling your record.
Wow.
Which is kind of sad. But somebody's okay. Well, maybe I'll take advantage of that, and yeah, maybe I make more money selling this T-shirt, and then I can go do the next album because I saw all these T-shirts.
Yeah, it's all about thinking outside the box, really, and just coming up with that next really like evolutional step for music, and that's we're sort of all facing that during COVID, and Amiri and I were talking and just contemplating like how we can fully bring the live music to people at their house, and it's going to be impossible, but it's not going to be impossible.
Yeah, well, if you guys thought about doing live, people have been doing like the Instagram live and going on Twitch. People have been going on, YouTube live and Facebook live. But I've been starting to get like companies coming to me telling me they want to do these online concerts, and they want to have like virtual ticket things where the tickets are like anywhere from $1 to $5, and bands. But the problem is with some of this stuff, in order to do it right, you do have to have a better level of equipment to capture it. You maybe have to have some really good web cameras, like some Zoom Q8s or something, and maybe a rolling video mixing board so you can get multiple camera angles. But that's kind of like, okay, you do it with what you got and you start making money, then you can get better equipment.
Exactly.
It's like any band that was on the road. It's like, okay, you might have started off with like some amps that you don't know who made them, and then you get a Marshall or you get some Orange amps because you made money. So you kind of as it's okay. Well, what can I do to get away with it for the first ones, and then as I get better, and I can get better cameras, and then maybe I can get a 3 camera shot, instead of a 1 camera shot. And then you can get better mics and better video equipment, so you can put like your website on it. So somebody could streaming below. You could have a PayPal me link. Streaming as people are playing, and say, please hit the PayPal me link.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that you can do, and people are doing it. You link yourself with some kind of techie kid that's into you, and have them say, hey, you get to see us for free or something, and and they help you build a better capability.
That's all it is just having the network around you and just building off of that. And that's so funny because it's like we put all this work, like the camera angles and all the recording, and then to bring it to someone's phone, but
you do all this work to get it like 4K, and somebody's watching on a low phone that can't do
yeah
it, and then the sound, you put all this money into trying to give them like a high definition audio, and they're getting like through like their Bluetooth headphones don't actually support
it. Right. And it could be to our blessing, because we're in a time where people like to listen to, like, in a sense, bedroom music. A lot of artists are recording their music in their own home and their bedroom, and they have that kind of like relaxing feel, and people are used to like having that isolation listening. So you never know, we already have that. The majority of people might like to listen alone with headphones on, and who knows.
Yeah, I think that the bedroom artist, I would say I'm a bedroom producer myself. I've been doing it for years, and it's just interesting that now everybody's in the bedroom.
Yeah.
And now it's like oh, I've been there for a while, but it's interesting now everybody's in that position. But yeah, like 3 or 4 years ago, I was doing Facebook Lives as part of my recording my bedroom studio performances and just doing it, and now that's like the new thing. The people to do that, and it's like, well, I've been doing that for like 4 years.
Exactly. But, people just want visuals,
Yeah, well, visual is the main thing today. Is like I always tell bands, like you can put all the effort into the audio, but if you really got to get a YouTube video, you got to get something on Vimeo, you got to get it on Instagram. Because then you get that worldwide audience. Then there are people watching you in like Central America and Asia and Europe, and you're like, wow, I got fans like in all over the place, and you didn't know, because the video will reach them, even more than the music. And so that's always a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So you guys are pushing toward trying to do more video type of media for your work?
Oh yeah, and we have a guy that we actually really kind of consider part of the band, to be honest with you. He basically does all our videography work. His name is Brian Peterson, and he directed like a couple music videos with me and Amiri for our other project, Pro Cool. And we've kind of like, we'll just go around like once a week and just like take a camera and like we'll either jam or we'll go to some like exotic like location that's not too far away. I mean, luckily in Orlando there's a lot of like
stuff that looks good. Yeah, visually I can see it would probably look more interesting than what I have here in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Oh, but that's beautiful too itself.
Yeah, well, I take advantage of the woods. I try to take my electronic music and go into the deep dark woods and then make it like vampire like psychedelic.
That's a pretty cool concept.
That's the way to do it, honestly.
Well, you take advantage of what you got. And you say, okay, I got all these dark shadows and weird light coming through these woods, through these pines, and I can use that to kind of do a gothic vibe.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, yeah. So I would just go out into the woods behind my house and to go for a walk with my dog, and then take my camera and shoot a bunch of stuff, and then run it through all kinds of filters and programs to turn it into like more psychedelic stuff.
Oh yeah, well, it's interesting because looking at your work, like especially your visual work, as well as your music too, it reminds me a lot of Throbbing Gristle, like what Throbbing Gristle was doing, and like bands like Psychic TV, especially like the visual aspect, this like super psychedelic, like almost like I don't know. I was watching this Tim Leary documentary where it's like very heavily edited and just like had this like very like it felt like you were like on acid or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah. Well, I'm actually like pretty straight laced, but my sensibilities are very much like a child of the '60s.
yeah, I'm the
So a
same.
lot of my visual work, I do use a lot of video tools to create that. And I kind of grew up with Hendrix and the Dead, and and Jefferson Airplane and all that stuff. So I was influenced by it, and I if I get flashbacks from my youth, and it gets into my work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I'm definitely in the same boat. I'm definitely like pretty straight laced too. I don't have a nervous system to handle anything crazy. For me, the music is the music, and the art, you know what I mean, is it, you know.
But I always appreciated that kind of work. I was always into what Andy Warhol was doing. I was into what Versailles was doing. I was into a lot of like stuff that kind of drove very cinematic, kind of off kilter, would look psychedelic, and it's like, why are you going there? So, well, kind of that's where my sensibilities are, in terms of like visual art. That's why I like that. And so I'll go in that direction, but I don't have to have that stimulus to get me there. My mind's already kind of, for some reason, it's already there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I definitely understand that.
And music in itself can become a drug, because sometimes when you hear something so crazy, it can like make your brain tingle. Like it has the ability to make you feel something in itself.
Yeah, I think music definitely does drive that. Like if you get I'm such a big music fan. I listen to every genre. I mean, I listen to Johnny Cash, I listen to The Clash, I'll listen to Public Enemy, I'll listen to Tyler, I'll listen to Procol Harum, Orange 9mm, Jay-Z. I pretty much anything that's good, whatever genre is in, I'm going to listen to it. And so I just kind of get drawn into it. And every music has a feel. And I kind of look at it like music is like a sound painting. And every, musician is a painter. And you get different layers of that color from whatever they're doing. And that kind of what it drives my sensibilities, because I can kind of pick up on the visual nature. Maybe I got like synesthesia or something, but I pick up on the visual nature of audio.
No, I love that. Yeah, that's very much how like we kind of think about music as well. It's just like you said, like it's like a painting. Yeah, it's interesting just understanding the relationship between like sound and like the images that it might like evoke, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean. The people had like a big kind of. Some people didn't like the idea of music videos back in the day because they felt like it took the imagination out of what you used to do. Like, I was a big vinyl kid. I grabbed, like a vinyl Yes album, go in the basement with a bunch of my friends, and we listened to the, Yes album all the way through, or Fragile all the way through. And there's no video. We were just kind of like, okay, we're getting the interpretation of what we think it is. And then kind of video kind of changed that. And it was cool. I was like a kid listening to Duran Duran and Flock of Seagulls and all that, but and watching it. But I was like, I did kind of miss the days when I would just go back with Zeppelin 4 and go in the basement and imagine all these Celtic weird things that Jimmy Page and Robert Plant were putting down. It's like, what are they really trying to get at?
Oh yeah, no, there's a real powerful aspect to just the listening experience itself. And for me, it's I listen to music very similar. Like I'll sit down and like on my days off or whatever, I'll just sit down with an album and I'll just drive around, listen to. I mean, there's still obviously visual like stimulus there, but and it's interesting because I feel like albums or music in a way, now that visuals have become more integrated with it, it's made the music itself less cinematic. So the music itself has become less visual, because there's now a visual aspect. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, because like a film director takes a video, a song, and then they turn it into a visual, and then that visual sometimes becomes kind of well worn, or it becomes a little too, pop, or too kind of obvious, and like all the mystery of like listening to an album without the visual is taken away from you. And when you had bands that were doing progressive rock, like doing rock opera, right? You know, like a band like The Who doing Tommy. You know, like if you had made a video for every song on Tommy, then you're going to interpret Tommy that way. But when you just heard it as the rock opera without any visual, you got to interpret that story. Or you listen to like Pink Floyd, you know, any of their albums that are rock operas. And without the visual, you can kind of feel what it is. But when you put the visual in, it does make it less cinematic. Because the Pink Floyd albums, they're very cinematic. Mm-hmm. You know, they end up making films out of them, and it kind of changed your impression of it. But I didn't go watch the films. I kind of had my own vision of it from what I heard.
Yeah, I definitely have like a very similar like view on that. Like it's weird because like people send me music videos. I'll literally just like go to the Spotify and I'll just be like, I really don't want to see the visual because I don't want it to lock me in. You know, there's something about, like you said, like your own mind going to a place as opposed to having a preconceived notion of what visually you should be thinking about, you know.
So are you guys with Space Adaptation Syndrome, are you guys working toward like a full-length project?
Yes. Right now we're working on a 13-track album. It's going to be self-titled. And right now we're almost complete with tracking. It's been, I mean, I started writing the guitar and bass parts about 2 years ago. Then we met, me and Amiri met up and started a band called Propos Fool. And then we're like, well, we also want to do another side project. So I had enough tracks left over to kind of became Space Adaptation Syndrome. And then, we met Dimitri and it kind of clicked. And, but yeah, right now we're sitting on a 13-track album, a self-titled album that should be coming out by the end of this year.
Oh, that's awesome. So what I always like to let the bands I talk to, we have talked to bands many, many times where we have them come on and do another episode. So when that album comes out, I'd like to invite you to kind of do it like an album release episode where we can kind of talk about the whole project. Kind of maybe on the cusp of it coming out to kind of help you with your promotion.
Yeah, most definitely. That sounds great.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So let us know when the best time impact for that would be, and we can get that kind of set up when you're closer to knowing you got it. And we can schedule that. I've done that with a couple of artists I've talked to when they have new projects out there. So yeah, that'd be really cool. So we are getting to the end of our time at Anchor FM. Actually, we'll cut this off at like 75 minutes. I'm pretty close to that. But yeah, I appreciate being able to talk to you guys. And I'm looking forward to all the work that you have out there. We're going to put the links to all your space adaptation tracks. So we see 2 tracks out there right now. We want to tell everybody to make sure that they check out your band on all the streaming services where you're available. We are part of Spotify, so we'll kind of push the Spotify version. Yeah, just check out like what you have, like Pale Horses and Self-Induced Amnesia. And yeah, we want people to go check those tracks out right now. After you hear this will be out on all 11 podcast platforms that we're on, which include Apple Podcast, Radio Public, Overcast, Stitcher, and many, many more.
Oh, perfect.
Including Spotify. So we will link on our channel on Instagram. There's an integration between the Spotify podcast version of this podcast. And so when we push it out there, it will actually have a link that your fans can listen to the Spotify version of this podcast if they click the highlight that we're going to push out.
Awesome.
So that may give us a pretty cool integration where you can have a direct link and we'll kick it right off.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we'll get that out within the next hour, and we'll send you the top 3 links, the Anchor FM link, the Apple link, and the Spotify link. And then you can push it out to your fan base. And you will be pushing out our blogger page as well. We'll put our blogger article out, and we'll send that to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having us. It's been a great opportunity. It's been really good to just talk to. It's hard to find like other musicians that are like so into the same stuff that you're into. Thanks for having us on. and we really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoy talking to artists since I'm locked in my bedroom studio. This gives me a chance to talk to people, and I don't feel so locked out.
Exactly. That's what, like you said, podcasting is going to survive through this.
Yeah, it's been a really good thing for me to get in connection with the like-minded people, find out about other musicians, and just keep the faith and keep going in the art I'm into, with you guys. So, yeah, I appreciate that you came on the show, and we're gonna put this out. Hope all your fans dig it, and we'll talk to you soon when you have your new album.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.